Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sup/X/. I'm a legit sorcerer from an old family of magic practitioners in the rural Midwest, and some of the most trash you will ever meet. I'm talking more backwoods dysfunction in one extended family than at least half of West Virginia combined. I've since relocated far away from their bullshit, so I can answer pretty much any questions you have about real magic, its irresponsible uses, and my fucked up childhood in general. Pick-related, pretty goddamn close to the view out of my shared bedroom window as a kid.
I'll bite. How did you start? What do you practice? What has really blown your mind regarding magic?
Thanks. Like all my family, I started as a very young child under the tuition of my elders. In reality, I learned most of what I know beyond the basics from observation and trial and error because my family are mostly shit teachers. I practice an odd mix of what could be called folk magic, roots and all that, and what this board would call old hermetic sim with a lot of symbols. That last one is tough, but I'd have to say that the most mind-blowing thing is people assuming that if they had magic, all their problems would be solved like, well, magic. It's sort of like money. If you don't have any, you're in a bad way. But the more money you got, the more problems you have that stem from it.
So then, do you feel like magic is even worth learning?
Oh, it is. I mean, I wish I had a better childhood, but I can do magic. Rich people can lament their problems till the cows come home, but you don't see many taking vows of poverty. Like anything else, there's a trade-off, and for me, it's worth it.
What's your metaphysics like? Do you honestly believe in what you're doing? What was your upbringing like? As in, did you have any friends, go to school, or vacations, etc.?
I'm not sure what you mean by metaphysics. I've heard of the school of philosophy, but I never could wrap my head around Kant. If you're asking about the magic, it varies. Pretty much all of it occupies a weird gray area between inborn ability, learned knowledge, and inexplicable bullshit. Some places have power, some objects too, and some of both are alive in their own way and even aware. Some magic has predictable rules that can be back-engineered and applied to other things, and other bits are pretty close neighbors to creepypasta rituals. The two main theories are that we're exploiting bugs in the source code of the universe, not how it was explained to me as a kid, but the same general idea, and that we're using discovered fragments of the language God used to speak the world into being. Personally, I lean towards the latter, since language does play into it big league, and we even have languages of our own that normies can't learn or understand. But some stuff I think are just echoes of really huge supernatural events that we mortals can use to our own ends. Like a tribe finding really nice iron deposits in a meteor strike and using them to get a leg up in weapons. And some came from somewhere else. We very much operate in the twilight zone. Wall of text over, I do. I see tangible results, and for better or worse, it's altered the shit out of my life. My upbringing was a white trash nightmare. I hesitate to say we were homeschooled since we focused pretty heavily on the family knowing to the point that you could gain status in the family by learning how to drive and interact in society enough to go on runs to Costco. Anything that didn't relate directly to the family trade was secondary at best. We lived in a weird little village of trailers and shacks clustered around the big house, where the redneck patriarch and matriarch lived with their favored relations, aka the one place that always had running water, electricity, and cable. If you were in favor, you could run out an extension cord, or if you had the cash, buy a generator. I'd say there were around 30 people at any given time, and other kids, but we usually didn't socialize with outsiders often since we were so far out.
What exactly can you do with it?
Most obvious is telekinesis, which comes naturally with practicing, but you have to really focus on to get good with. It's not quite right, but the closest I can describe it is like the relationship between learning martial arts and serious strength training. I read The Men Who Stare at Goats a while back and started trying out some things in it, which definitely sounded like shit people with natural talent could learn without a family store of knowing. And I've been able to walk through a wall once or twice. Hard to pin that one down. The mindset is tricky. Aside from that, I can do a lot of shit, pretty random and all over the place. But my mainstays are sealing runes, wards, but they can do more than protect against hostile magic. Strengthening buildings with prepared iron rods at every corner, building protective charms, crafting minor magical items, hit and miss there, calling down bad luck on unprotected persons I dislike, and lots of really specific shit I've picked up over the years.
Tell some childhood magic stories, please. I'm interested.
You want infuriating golden child bullshit, a serious near miss, or something relatively funny and lighthearted?
I am inclined towards the last one, but whatever you tell the best. They are your stories after all.
I'll go with that then. Before anyone asks, the fact that we had such an amazing gift as a family and still lived in those conditions fucking infuriates and confuses me to this day, even with all the shit they did that was objectively worse. We always had money from selling our services and plenty of it, but my family were in general terrible with money too, and so freaking insular that living off property was a little suspicious, not to mention the inbreeding, to keep the blood strong, like fourth generation in some cases. I think the gift is the only thing that kept the babies from coming out disabled. Anyway, funny story. It gets fairly cold where we resided. Not as cold as where I live now, but enough that on the trailers with working plumbing lines, freezing was a problem on the trailers with running water. Now you could unfreeze them the safe way, with a hairdryer and patience. But like all backwoods folk, the latter was in very short supply. So out came the propane blowtorches you used to burn off weeds in fields after harvesting. Now, my God only knows how many times where cousin Stevie, who'd managed to get his dad to pass on the line fire starting on his deathbed and keep it in the family, decides to earn some status and thaw Billy Bob's. I swear to Christ that's actually what he was called. Pipe real quick. Problem being that the entire underside of the trailer was thick with cobwebs, dust, and combinations thereof, so Billy Bob and his brother were being very, very careful with the blowtorch. Stevie did not know this, did not ask, and was not very careful anyway. Billy Bob had about 1 second to look at Stevie with an expression of dawning horror before the smarmy son of a bitch spoke a word like the crackle of a newborn forest fire and snapped his fingers purely for style. I swear the entire fucking underside of that trailer flash incinerated, flame rolling from one side to another and just eating everything. Now, Stevie had mastered starting fires because he was basically the world's luckiest pyromaniac, hence why his dad held off on teaching him until his deathbed. But he hadn't quite mastered the art of putting fires out. Cue like 10 people tearing out the cheap wooden garden slats around the base of the trailer and scrambling under it to put out smoldering spots. I had a grand old time watching this from a flatbed my aunt turned into a front porch, though I felt a little guilty because I'd seen Stevie strut up, knew what was about to go down, and kept my trap shut because Billy Bob had made my favorite cousin take his shit-stained offspring with her on the town run instead of me, when I'd been looking forward to the Costco food court all week. On reflection later, fuck Billy Bob. No one gets between me and my pizza and churros. Bonus, everyone else was so freaked out that no one paid attention to exactly what Stevie said, which was one of those faithless words that can be repeated just from hearing it. Took me months to get it working, especially in secret, and I never did master it to the degree he had even at that age. But I've never had to carry a lighter or matches since.
That was the most hick-sounding story I've ever heard. I liked it.
I'm barely scratching the surface here. Redneck engineering plus magic. One time Big John, the current fat-ass patriarch, bought a sectional couch off Craigslist with the elite computer skills of yours truly, and sent his favored dumbass spawn to fetch it packed into a camper pickup with a flatbed hitched up behind it. Of course, they forgot tie-down straps, so since they brought like 4 times as many people as they needed to move the thing anyway, because they had extra cash to burn for scripts at the pharmacy, cigarettes, and McDonald's, and normally riding along for a town run was a special privilege. They had all the people that would fit just hold on for dear life to the sides of the flatbed and use their combined telekinesis to hold the couch down all the way home. They had to go back and get flyaway cushions 3 times before they thought to put them in the cab. Bonus, I got half a milkshake and like 6.5 burgers and fries combos worth of half-eaten meals because after trading off being a strap the whole way home, everyone basically wandered off and fell asleep.
To what extent can you use your telekinesis?
I can actually douse for water. I've managed to tap into a series of doors that lead nowhere for most people but connect to each other for those who can. Used sparingly, the door's owners and operators don't much like me. Do some summoning, very rarely and cautiously. Some really simple necromancy. See magic in colors normal people can't. Douse for water with 100% accuracy. Summon a light thunderstorm interspersed with sunlight and mist once per summer, and remove small objects from a person who's either about to try to kill me or seriously considering it. That last one I think was developed to pickpocket magically off people who were already enemies, but I've mainly used it to diffuse encounters by taking the rounds right out of someone's gun and letting them fall from my fingers right in front of his, one time her, eyes. I can also see very well in the dark, speak goblin, and am owed 2 favors by what I'm pretty sure is a kobold.
Doorkeepers, are they demons, angels? You mentioned magic is like speaking God's word, trying to find the glitches of the universe. Are there supernatural beings that serve God? Can you talk to God, or does he block himself off?
That's a whole basket of I don't know. I know there are holes, as Stephen King put it, right through the middle of things, and there are words and rituals that hold the levers for a lot of otherwise immovable physical laws, but beyond that I have no idea. I've never seen an angel. I've run into a few things that could be categorized as demons, though, but they could have easily been just very old and strong predators.
Most of the bloodlines I've encountered are degenerate like that nowadays. Usually they're scattered through the Ozarks and Appalachians. Part of the reason why they huddle up and live in squalor is because it breeds strife. Strife breeds need, and need breeds power.
Interesting take. I haven't heard of many in the Ozarks, but I know my family had a major feud with a rival clan in Florida. One of many reasons I have never visited.
To what extent can you use your telekinesis?
I've put a lot of effort into mine, so I can lift and throw back manlets, but also do intricate shit like pick simple locks or reassemble a dismantled gun from 4 feet away. If I overuse it, though, I get really mentally burned out real fast, like spending a day doing math. Magicians who get mixed up with cults tend to have freakishly strong telekinesis, but not as much control.
When you get back, could you give me some info on where to get started with all this you can do? Primarily telekinesis. Is it even possible without a person there to teach you? Because I'm assuming you have to see it firsthand to really develop the will to learn it.
Inborn talent is required, which most people don't have. If you are a bit psychic, you should be able to exercise your strength over time, although it can be very hard without first-hand examples. Almost all real knowledge is jealously guarded, so don't expect to find much functionality in, say, Crowley.
Sorry to break it out to you, but the whole BS about bloodlines in magic is hardcore roleplay, or special unique snowflakery. You become a magician by being initiated, not because you were born to a special family. As for why your family remained poor, even though they know how to do magic, is simple. Money magic is very complex, and most magicians don't even understand basic macroeconomics, so of course they don't know how to angle their spells. Asking Jupiter to give you $1,000 out of nowhere might work once, but that's not going to happen every month because you're a small fry in a very big world.
On top of being wrong, you are literally mentally handicapped. They didn't ask any deities for shit. I stated explicitly that they were performing supernatural services for cash, spell slingers for hire. Go roleplay breaking your arms with your mom. To make another point, inborn ability and knowledge is a two-way street. The more you know before you have kids, the stronger your kids will start out, and they may just naturally manifest a simple version of one of your most used spells, or one that just happens to be contagious. There is no upward ceiling I've heard of on how strong you can become if you just keep acquiring knowledge. However, it's a lot like money. You need to have it to make it, except for a few who start with nothing and luck into power they absorb from an artifact or a book, really eager to jump into someone's head. Otherwise, making extremely risky deals with shady entities is your only route up.
People assuming that if they had magic all their problems would be solved. Oh boy, do I hear that. Unless you literally have god-level magical ability, you're still just a sorcerer rotting in a hell full of evil morons, actively trying to make everything shit 24/7. Honestly, I'd rather just have been born rich than be any version of magic practitioner. My biggest question is, how in the hell does a tribe of hillbillies become pagans? Were you pagans or just weird magic practicing Christians? What's your family's history? How did this get started? I have met white trash families with inherited traditions of magical practice on several occasions actually, but typically they don't stretch back that far. One of them got interested in Wicca or something, since neo-pagans tend to be poor for some reason, and then passed it on to their kids.
It goes back a long way, possibly since distant ancestors touched down in the New World, although there's one story that we learned the basics from a native shaman after settling. Not religious at all, one way or another, and I'm extremely suspect of you mentioning Wicca. Wicca is a constructed religion based heavily on Christianity and surviving Christianized fragments of old folk tales. It has nothing inherently magical at all, or everyone would be doing it.
OP is role-playing hardcore and doesn't know shit about what they're talking about. Crowley is a good start, if a bit pompous. If you want some mundane stuff like telekinesis, look into Eastern practices, but be prepared to spend a good chunk of your life training. That shit ain't free.
The life training part is spot on, all else is garbage. Crowley, I believe, had a real experience in Egypt and may have had something gifted to him, but he went off track when he failed to follow all the instructions, fortifying an island as a cult headquarters, for example, and his writings are basically garbage. Again, if they weren't and anyone could use them, everyone would be.
All right, OP, can you post some pictures of your stuff? I mean, runes, anything you'd have. Also, do you know about some solid references or starting points in this realm? I've always had feelings and sights of things that would always go well beyond me, but never have I been able to bind it to my will or make use of it. Living in a big city ain't of no help, considering the horrible amount of false and bullshit literature on the subject, effectively drowning out all bits of truth I could have come across. I'm most interested in your symbolistic approach you talked about earlier. Got anything on that?
Can, but I won't, especially of symbols, because while simple things like circles are universal, the more you use a symbol, the less powerful it becomes, which is why the cross doesn't repel evil anymore, unless you put a lot of energy into it. Spread a symbol around too much, and it becomes next to mundane. The Mormons understand this. Their most sacred symbols are kept carefully hidden in the temple and are only used in sacred rites. This is why most symbol magic has an expiration date and obfuscation built in. My only advice is to keep practicing. Cities have a rhythm of their own once you get it. Post videos of yourself online once you learn how to do something real, and when it gets taken down, whoever did it will contact you to bring you on as a flunky in exchange for knowledge. That's your in. Even if you get a bad draw and wind up with a loser, you can use that loser to get access to the wider community. I say this because it's the only way I've ever heard of a normie being brought in without unknowingly having a practitioner friend. Just be careful and don't get your organs harvested.
Please do develop on symbols. I've myself got into sigilization with very little results, but have had more success with a personal form of it, in order to bind myself to the fulfillment of certain tasks I normally wouldn't have been able to do. I did notice that my symbols would be of help during a certain amount of time and then become useless. What more can you say about this? Why would symbols become less and less efficient the more we look at them?
They become common. They're only special and achieve results because you know they're special. Remember, there's a subconscious and that can impact shit. Sounds like you've been skipping crucial steps and learning for a quick fix.
I have an amulet that I wear 24/7. A few times I've accidentally gotten it seen by people and gotten lectured by the friend that set it up for me. I'm not sure what to do about family members having seen it a bunch of times. It feels like every time I come back and visit, it somehow makes its way out of my shirt without me realizing. Presumably this is because I'm an idiot. But you know what really pisses me off? The fact that my family members found and handled a bunch of my tools, and even though I've asked them to step the fuck off, they think LOL, look at the pretty wands and shit. I honestly don't even know how they ended up sitting out in the open in the first place, though it was probably me making some error, but it's infuriating. An especially weird point is that none of them believe, but, at least as far as my mother and sister go, have some kind of legitimate power. Not sure about my dad. So, I'm not sure what it means to have had someone else take your tool and use it for pretend magic. and then actually have some influence. On the one hand, no one else should be handling your shit, with rare exceptions, so that's bad no matter what. But then I can't figure out how bad it is for a person with active doubt about the object being good for anything to come in contact with it. When they can simultaneously do a little, hurts my brain, pissed regardless. Seriously, just because I'm injured and can't move to physically stop you, doesn't mean you get to ignore me when I tell you to put something down or not to touch something. Christ, I've been trying to hide my shit and move things to my apartment, but it's been slow going. But seriously, advice on negating the influence of others? I'm also in a weird place with my amulet. Long story, my friend point blank refused to make one for years, but was totally willing to empower or program one for me the second I bought a pre-made one. Fuck, first I offered to pay for any components they might need to make one, and then I suggested making it myself, but still, nope. But then comes along something already inscribed, engraved, whatever, with a shit ton of runes and whatever, and that'll work. Seriously? Why? Fuck. I can see why you might not have wanted me to personally inscribe magical languages, writing systems, sigils, what the fuck ever, because I have a tendency to cause problems by overthinking way too fucking hard. But still, really?
The best way I can think of to explain it is, it's like asking someone who doesn't know much about cooking to fix you something to eat. They likely aren't capable of making it from scratch, but if you show up with some hamburger helper, they can cobble something together.
That makes a lot of sense. I still end up running into wondering how much trouble inscribing some empowered runes would be. But then I remember being told that making something like this would be totally exhausting, and would have them on their ass for like the next week. V's. When this amulet was used as a base, they were only wreck for like a day or so, if that. Maybe not even. What they mentioned to me at the time was pretty vague, because I have a very bad habit of occasionally tinkering with magic to come in contact with, without meaning to, generally out of subconscious curiosity. I've caught myself doing it. Hey, this is different. What's this? Almost always seems to be the motive for it. So, my friend, as a general rule, tries to basically hide things as much as possible because they got tired of me dismantling things and them having to repair them. LOL. It is exactly the equivalent of them buying me a camera, and then me coming back to them saying, "Hey, this doesn't work." And when they take a look, it's a pile of screws, generalized metal parts, and assorted plastics. Oh, and realize I forgot to clarify. The more I know about how something works or where it's located or something like that, obviously, the easier it is for me to mess with it. Hence their developed habit over the many years of becoming increasingly less forthcoming about the technical specifications about how they've done something. Can't say I blame them, really. It's frustrating on both our ends, because I always want to know all the things, hence the issue. So of course I don't like not being told when I wonder. But on the other hand, they're the one getting their workings taken apart all the goddamn time, though generally only when it's directly relevant to me or I'd have a reason to think about it at all for any length. So that one's probably a lot worse. Makes me feel bad, though. There have been occasions when it's actually been kind of funny in that way that messing with your friends can be.
That shouldn't affect anything actually magical. If there was magic so easily eroded by skepticism, it's long gone by now. Magical items don't give a fuck. Sounds like your family are kind of awful, though.
This is a good point. Honestly, I wonder if I've seen any dips in power. It might be due to my own skepticism and worry, as the user, that it's been weakened or degraded in some way. It's something I've been pondering for a while. Maybe I can use that to convince myself otherwise. They're actually not awful. In fact, they're way better than a lot of families I've heard of. But when it comes to the idea of something being off limits or an object being personal private, they can be incredibly annoying. Although now that I think about it, actually, most of my irritation from that comes from only two things: conflicts about computers, games, related tech over the years, and just a few of my magical possessions, tools. Stop trying to expose my obsidian scrying orb to the light. How many times do I need to tell you? Get the fuck away from the box. In the latter, I think it's mostly just curiosity, appreciation of how things look. Ooh, shiny. because the more everyday-looking stuff I have has largely been left alone, though this may also be due to most of it being out of sight or tucked away, sort of by happenstance. If I ever tried to set up an actual workspace, they'd have their hands over it almost immediately, I swear to God. So what I'm saying is it's super annoying, but they aren't bad or anything.
Lack of personal space is still a red flag. I know I struggled with admitting even to myself how fucked my family was, and without my crazy survivalist normal uncle, I'd probably still be brainwashed. Gotta say though, a lot of that stuff probably won't be harmed by anything because it probably doesn't work. All magical items are ever so slightly alive, and more than half do weird shit on their own. I've never run into a scrying object, or anything besides some weapons made of obsidian. If it works for you though, then cool. Glad I could help.
Well, I wouldn't say there's anything about it that's different from any other chunk of obsidian, but obsidian, for whatever reasons, has always seemed to immediately get me into a certain headspace, and then sometimes things progress from there, which is pretty similar to how I ended up with a lot of what I have. Things that I've either always responded to or seem to shine to me. In other words, it's not enchanted or somehow empowered by some primal source, specifically for scrying and the like, but I use it that way because its properties, for me at least, are beneficial for that purpose. As far as I know, I only have 2 objects that have ever been empowered or charged by someone else, one of which was broken years ago, which was devastating, and then upon repair, the magic was very, 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 very obviously gone upon touching it. Touch is kind of my thing. As for items in general being magical or not, I think the problem is definition. If it has a specific magical purpose encoded from some unknown source, then yes, I think it would be fair to argue it's magic. If it's been done by a known source, such as a person, well, it's a magical object, isn't it? It pings as one to the touch. But on the other hand, it isn't inherently, is it? It's more like someone reprogrammed it. In the same sense, it gets a bit odd when we talk about normal objects or materials from the world being magical or not magical. I would argue that everything has its own properties, and some are more magical than others, even if inherently the object is mundane. In this sense, magic is, oddly enough, mundane in its own way, because it's pervasive. However, that doesn't mean it's usually powerful, and that's also a major factor in is something a magical item. I guess put it in an entirely different way. Suppose you come across a bracelet that you know for a fact someone has made. Clearly it is jewelry. Then say that you find one that you think most likely was made by someone. But you can't technically prove this. You're probably still going to call it jewelry. How about if you find individual beads? Well, no, it's not. But if you put them into the right shape, it would be, and these items are clearly far more suited to the purposes of making a bracelet than most of what you'd come by. All right. Now say you find a natural formation of stone in the wild that looks exactly like a bracelet. Is it one? Well, no, and yes. If you say no, it's because there was no intentional design by an acting party. At least that is outside of nature. But at the same time, if you removed it from that context of nature or even left it there, many people would immediately identify it as a bracelet, and thus jewelry because it is clearly suited for it. But does that make it jewelry? Does it do so on an inherent level, or does it only do so if a person then proceeds to use it as such? What if an item of jewelry, such as a bracelet, was found by a person who had never heard of bracelets or jewelry at all? The questions just end up burrowing a rabbit hole to the center of the earth. It's not a new philosophical debate by any means, though I'm not sure if I've ever seen these sorts of things applied to the concept of magic before. I'm sure it has been, however. Then you have the whole is the definition based on power thing, and then that's entirely subjective based on what your basis for comparison is. Does someone need to have 0.5% more skill in something to be considered an outlier? Or do they need 10% or 500%? I tend to think about basically everything in this sort of questioning way, which, yes, makes life difficult.
Is magic something in the family, or is it something that anyone can use, like a mental hidden power?
As I've said, it almost always has to be something in the family. It's hereditary. However, it has to come from somewhere, and you can strengthen that hereditary magic with your own personal development, or if you are very lucky, break into it from outside. The former is like becoming ridiculously wealthy, starting with a world-class education, networking, and a small loan of $1 million from your father. The latter is like becoming a self-made multimillionaire from literal homelessness, except you live in a world of mostly homeless people who don't know rich people exist in real life.
How about some proof? Post video from your phone of you using this so-called fire magic.
If I want to be murdered, sure. There's some slack for noobs to be brought into the fold, none for people that know better.
This fucker has given every single excuse in the book for not posting a single solitary picture. When one reason gets explained away, he comes up with a new one.
In fairness, it isn't as if posting pictures of where he lived growing up would really prove jack shit. And also, if it were me and I had some kind of demonstrable visible power, I wouldn't show that to people either, and never on the internet. Most people will call hoax, and that tiny portion of people who don't will be made out of the following: idiots who believe everything, people who know this kind of stuff exists and don't need to be shown, and theoretically, if you're unlucky enough, you might end up having exposed yourself to people and interested parties that might pose an actual danger to you. There is literally no benefit whatsoever to providing actual proof in 99% of cases, and I leave that last percent only because I'm sure there's something I wouldn't think of.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.